Stop blaming me for the image you created in your head. I am not using anyone, and certainly not the one whose name you keep dragging into every storm. My silence was not an agreement to your accusations, it was a prayer whispered in the night, hoping maturity would find you before your bitterness consumed what's left of the truth. Love isn't a weapon, yet you've sharpened it to strike. The bond we once shared now feels like a courtroom where I'm always the defendant, and you're the judge, jury, and executioner. Fueled not by facts, but by feelings you haven't dared to fully understand. I did not step into anyone's life with the intent to manipulate. What you call using is actually presence, offering someone my sincerity without conditions, without transactions. I never promised forever, I only promised to be real. And being real means sometimes things don't align the way hearts want them to. You confuse affection with control, care with calculation. But I refuse to live under suspicion just because someone else once hurt you before I ever arrive. People love in different languages, and I tried speaking in every one of them so you'd understand. I held on when the world advised me to let go. I stayed when walking away would have spared me the shame, the rumors, and the endless interrogations. Still, I am accused of using someone, how ironic, when it's my intentions that have been used and twisted into a narrative you find easier to swallow than the truth. I've been painted the villain in a story I never agreed to be a part of. Do you know what it feels like to be punished for loving genuinely? To be questioned for every act of kindness, as though I have some hidden agenda? I was not molding her into something for myself. I was celebrating her for everything she already was. If I listened, it's because I cared. If I protected, it's because I respected. And if I walked away, it's because sometimes, love also means not causing harm by staying where you're no longer trusted. My conscience is clean, but your words are like smoke trying to cloud the clarity I've always lived by. Stop blaming me for your inability to see the difference between a user and someone who simply had the courage to choose peace over chaos. I didn't use her, I saw her. I didn't play with her emotions, I honored them. But how can you recognize truth when you've been nurturing your anger longer than your empathy? You speak so loudly of betrayal, but forget how silence has been my only defense. I refused to respond to every provocation, not because I had no answer, but because I didn't want the woman I admired to be dragged into unnecessary battles. I chose dignity. I chose restraint. But you took that as guilt. No, silence is not confession. It is strength. It is love choosing not to shout where it should walk away. I do not owe anyone an apology for being human, for loving someone openly yet respectfully. If I stepped into someone's life, it was never to fill a void but to share a space, however temporary or eternal that may be. Using someone implies taking from them, leaving them less than what they were. But if you truly looked, you'd see that all I ever did was give time, attention, protection, and words no one else dared to say. I won't let the story be rewritten with lies as ink and bitterness as the author. I know who I am. I know what I offered. And more importantly, she knows. That's all that matters. Opinions can shout, but they can't erase the peace that truth offers. So stop blaming me. Blame the fear inside you that convinces you pure love doesn't exist, that every man must be a pretender. That's not on me, that's on you. Let's stop pretending that the loudest one is always the most honest. I didn't run away, I stepped back to protect what was sacred. When someone's love becomes your battlefield, you don't fight harder, you retreat with grace. That's what I did. Not because I used anyone, but because I refused to let love be tainted by accusations that had no roots, only echo chambers. So many think they know, but they never saw the late nights I stayed awake, praying for her well-being. They never read the poems I wrote that will never be published, the kind meant only for her heart. They didn't see how I refused to respond to slander out of respect for her dignity. But still, the world speaks as though it watched our every moment. As if truth lives in gossip more than in genuine intention. In the end, all I ask is this: look deeper before you point fingers. What you call using, I call cherishing. What you call a game, I call a journey. Maybe it didn't end the way anyone expected, but don't let that blind you to the grace with which I walked away. I have always protected her, even from the truth that I carry like a stone in my chest. And I will continue to, because some things are too sacred to explain to those who only came to misunderstand. No, I am not using anyone. I never have. And if love, protection, patience, and poetry are crimes, then let me be guilty. But don't confuse your unresolved pain with my intentions. Don't rewrite my silence as cruelty. Don't project your fears onto my story. I have loved. I have lost. But I have never, ever used. She was never a chapter I intended to close, but sometimes the wind turns the page before you're ready. I held her name like a delicate rose between the pages of my soul, never to exploit, never to wound, but to preserve. And now, with every accusation hurled at me, I realize how easily people forget the beauty in silent sacrifices. What they call absence was my quiet way of protecting what they would never understand. I never played with her heart. I played protector to the storm that tried to reach it. And even when you call it manipulation, I call it love in its most misunderstood form. You look at the timeline and try to fit your assumptions into it, but you were never in the room when she broke down. You didn't hear the tremble in her voice when she whispered doubts into the air, thinking no one was listening. I was. And not once did I use that vulnerability to my advantage. I used it to strengthen her, to remind her she was more than her fears. If that's what using someone looks like in your world, then your dictionary is broken. Your heart may be too. What hurts the most is not your judgment, but how quickly you erase the evidence of my sincerity. I never came with a mask, never fed her illusions. I gave her raw truth, unfiltered emotions, and a mirror to see herself the way I saw her. Not because I needed to gain anything, but because I couldn't bear the thought of her doubting her own worth. The love I gave had no terms. I loved freely, knowing it could break me, and yet I did it anyway.